we're going to hear from Marti Garzi. He is with the International Association of Machinists. My husband is a retired machinist, so I have a fondness for the machinists. 2 decades of work in union organizing and fighting the good fight. A Texas native. We won't hold that against you. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Some love for Texas. Everybody in, nobody out. Just teasing, just teasing. Anyway, Marti is a really wonderful guy who's going to talk with us a little bit about the labor movement going into 2020 and what we may expect, what we may need, what we may hope for from the labor movement in terms of healthcare justice and our fight for Medicare for all. Marti?
As I was introduced, I work for the Machinists Union. We're an industrial union. We're largely private sector, although we do have a federal sector. We represent federal workers through our affiliate, the National Federation of Federal Employees, which includes workers at the VA hospitals across the country. So we as a union have members who have firsthand experience with a Medicare for all type system. We've been a long-time supporter of single payer under the leadership of our international president, Bob Martinez, person of color, Latino from my home state of Texas, largely supported by our general vice president of our Western Territory, which covers Oregon, Washington, California, and other parts out here west, Gary Allen. The Machinists have really stepped up in a big way to take on the Medicare for all fight. And this is important because those of you all, raise your hand if you either are a member of a labor union or work as staff for a labor union here in the audience. So a fair amount. You know that it's not a slam dunk, right? As has been talked about earlier, there's been some, as we see in Texas, crawdadding away from the issue, right? As we get closer and closer to it becoming a reality, the things just become way more real for people, and political considerations come into play. And you can sort of go one of two ways, right? You can lean into the headwinds and continue the fight, or you can sort of triangulate and try and give yourself some room. I'm proud to say that the Machinist leadership has firmly embraced the direction and the fight, and it hasn't come easy. I'm here to talk a little bit of truth, right, about this sort of divide in the labor movement. Some of our members, right, it's not an intuitive thing. When our executive council, our leadership said, we are going to come out strong for Medicare for all. We've been around 130 years. We started as a Southern union. We're a railroad union originally. We've got a mixed bag. On the one hand, we've had folks who, I would certainly identify as being part of the socialist sort of wing, like our president, William W. Wimpesinger, Wimpy, right? But then we've also had things like a color bar in our union. So we've got a mixed, just a bit of a mixed history. But now we, many of our officers in our leadership are men and women of color, right? Latinos, and again, we've got density in some states that other unions don't. So like Alabama, Texas, Florida, the Sun Belt. And so things that may be intuitive out here in the Pacific Northwest or up in liberal bastions like the Northeast, it's a little bit different when you're in some of these other states. We also represent aerospace workers, defense contractors. So it's not necessarily what I would call a particularly progressive liberal base of workers, but they are men and women that wake up every day to try and figure out how they're going to put food on the table for their families. And they understand which side of the toast their bread is buttered on. They are working class Americans. And so for us, we've really had to have the conversation about Medicare for all from that perspective. All the ideology aside of why Medicare for all is the right thing, at the end of the day, we approach it as if we are sitting down at the kitchen table with our spouses, with our mothers and fathers, our sons and daughters, and we're making decisions about where our paycheck goes and how that paycheck is spent. And we as machinists at the bargaining table, year after year, contract after contract, have faced the ever-increasing grim reality that the small patch of dry land that we stand on by virtue of having a union, whereas everybody else is sort of out for themselves in the wicked wild sea, is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every year because unions are not immune to market pressures. Our contracts, our benefits that we negotiate are not immune to the pressures of the market. And so while we are able to negotiate, hopefully robust health insurance plans and programs for our members, every year we have to decide between, trying to hold the line on premiums and co-pays and co-insurance and choice and pay raises and pensions and all the other issues that unions have to negotiate for. And that pie gets smaller and smaller and tougher to negotiate. So it's really for our leaders not that much of a, it's not really rocket science, though we represent rocket scientists, to figure out that Medicare for All would take some of that pressure off of us at the bargaining table and allow us to deliver the union difference for our members a lot easier. And so we decided to come out big and strong and do some education with our member leaders in places like Alabama, in places like Texas, in places like Arizona, to sort of explain to our members, right, who are no stranger to the reality of the pressures at the bargaining table. And so when we approach it as a kitchen table talk and looking at the pie and looking at our paychecks and where it's going, it's a no-brainer, right? Our members get it. They get it in their gut. They get it in their heart when they have to figure out how, their parents, who are falling into that gap between when Medicare kicks in, but they're not lucky enough to have retiree health insurance. And so it's those of us that are still working that are subsidizing, right, and making sure that our parents and our grandparents are making ends meet. That, our dollar would stretch a lot further if we didn't have to worry about our own health insurance. And so that's why, the Machinists Union has, again, come out strong on this. Every labor union in America is facing this same sort of quandary, right? It's a moral quandary. It's an economic quandary. I don't care if you're a public sector union or a private sector union. You got to figure this out. Your members got to figure this out. And it's competing against a lot of other issues because we are membership organizations, and depending on what union you're with, there's either more or less member democracy. For us, for the first time in our history, we're allowing our members direct voting on who we're going to endorse as a union in the primaries, which is a big deal. Because by and large, right, I'm not going to name names, right? I've worked for a lot of unions, but some unions sort of decided with a cabal of their executive council and a deal is cut, and then it's sold out to the members, right? And members are wondering, why do we endorse candidate A when they really aren't on the level with the issues that matter to us? And you saw that in the last election, right? For better or for worse, I don't care who you ended up voting for in the primaries, right? You saw, if you're a union member, that things go down a certain way. And so the Machinists decided, not this time, not this year, the stakes are too high. And so it's a little harder, it's a little more work for those of us that are on staff. But that means that, I'm going out and visiting all of our state councils, all of our big district lodges, and doing member education. Because while we care about things like protecting our pensions, like our pension fund in the Midwest that is under market pressures and stresses, right? We care about things like trade. We're an industrial union, so our core membership is decimated by horrible, right, trade agreements, right, and the negative side of globalization. So the Trump, NAFTA, USMCA, right, is a big deal for our members. So we have that on the table. But healthcare is out there, and it falls to me as the director of our healthcare department to go out there and do member education, because it's not, the presidential endorsement's not going to be decided in Washington, D.C. for our union. It's going to be decided in our union halls in Dallas, Fort Worth, in Phoenix, Arizona, in Portland, Oregon, and all these places to educate our members as to why making sure that where the candidates stand on Medicare for All is a determinative issue for how and why they should vote to have us endorse that candidate. And that is not going to be a small task. Because like I said, we have all these other issues that our our members care about, right? And again, it's just like at the kitchen table when you're looking at your monthly budget and figuring out where your dollars are going to go. We're doing that at the micro and the macro level. And so it's incumbent on those of us that are here at this conference, those of us that believe in Medicare for All, that we educate our brothers and sisters on the importance of what Medicare for All would mean for us as union members. And so you hear a lot about unions, well, we negotiate these great packages and that's what allows us to recruit members. I would challenge my brothers and sisters at those unions to say, if the only reason that your members are joining your union is because you run a Taft-Hartley or you're able to bargain on healthcare, then you got to do a little better, right? We should all do a little better because it's member dollars at work. I would argue that for those unions that say, well, we don't know about how it's going to affect our networks and providers and this, that, and the other. Unions do better when we go big and when we go bold, right? Our members give a flying F about whether it's Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare. None of our members are particularly attached to any particular union provider that they have to wrestle with when they got to get health care for our daughters, our sons, our mothers, our fathers, our family members, right? What our members want is the ability to make ends meet and know that if we face a catastrophic event, we're not going to be put into bankruptcy because of that medical debt. And the only way we're going to do that is by taking health care off the bargaining table, off the employer-union relationship, right? And then we can go in and then maybe, just maybe, we can bargain to save and expand our pension plans. Just maybe we can go in there and bargain, right, for cost of living adjustments and parity adjustments that bring wages up to close that gap where all this wealth generated by the working class has gone to the top 1%. Just maybe we can say, hey, we need that back, right? And maybe, just maybe, instead of creating our own clinics and healthcare schemes like some of our brothers and sisters are doing, which hats off to them, right? Because we got to figure out how to bring home the bacon for our members. But we should not, I don't want to be in the business of administering a Taft-Hartley or a healthcare fund or a clinic. I want to be in the business of winning and expanding rights on the job for our members and making sure that we have secure retirement and that we are getting our share of the wealth that our work generates. So, I encourage all of us here to go back and have these conversations with our brothers and sisters, member to member. If you're union staff, I encourage you to have it with your elected leaders and just look at what's going on across the movement because labor has a chance to step up and play a big role in this free-for-all that is the 2020 Democratic primary. There's a narrow window and we need to go big, we need to go bold, and I look forward to doing it shoulder to shoulder with everyone in this room. Thank you.